Hello guys, we're going to be going over Darwin's natural selection worksheet, going over the answers of those. Hopefully you guys have tried real hard, worked hard on it, and I will give you a chance to pause the video after you've seen us work through the first problem. I think that that's going to make a lot more sense to you on the following questions. So we're going to just start here at the top, and we're going to talk about Darwin's natural selection. Natural selection, this is something that we also call survival of the fittest. And so we're going to be thinking about the different variations that species have, and then we're going to talk about whether or not those are good variations or bad variations, and which one then will lead to more of that species surviving. So we're going to start with number one. There are two types of worms, worms that eat at night. These are nocturnal. If you hear of nocturnal creatures, these are anything that's up at night. We think about bats being nocturnal. You can think about, I know the coyotes at my house, I hear them at night. It seems like that they're doing a lot of yelping and crying. And so those are very nocturnal creatures. And then there's also a variation of worm that eats during the day. And this is called diurnal. And this is actually a word that's really more foreign. It's not used near as much as nocturnal. But the opposite then is diurnal. And the birds eat during the day. And so obviously, which of the worms will the birds be eating? They're eating the ones that are out of their holes, and they are the diurnal ones. The nocturnal worms, they're down in their burrows during this time. And every spring, when the worms reproduce, they have about 500 babies, but only 100 of these, 500, will ever become old enough to reproduce. So let's think about it. Which of those worms has natural selection selected against? So if you think about it, the diurnal worm is going to be at a disadvantage because it's going to have more predators. So natural selection has kind of worked against this type of worm that's just going to be out there trying to eat during the day. And then it's going to be for the nocturnal worms, the worms that are out there. I know when I was young, we would go out with a water hose and we would spray in the yard at night and take a flashlight to try to find these nocturnal worms that were coming up out of their holes so that we could take them and go fishing with us. But actually, natural selection is working very well for these particular worms because they are not subject to getting eaten by the predators. Darwin had 5 basic points in the scenario above, and we're going to talk about these. And then I'm going to encourage you to pause the video and go through and correct any of the following questions. If you, I think once you've seen an example of how to do this video or this worksheet, I believe that you're going to do a lot better because you'll see what is expected of you. On the first one, population has variations. Obviously, the variations or the variety or the differences in these worms is that some eat at night, they're nocturnal, and some eat during the day. So that is the 2 variations that are discussed in this particular question. Some variations are favorable. Once again, you're going to find that this is very repetitive, so don't get frustrated with it. But I think through this repetition, it should solidify this in your mind so you can do well on the test. And you'll certainly understand the concepts here. The variations that are favorable are the fact that the worms eat at night, the nocturnal ones, and they are not going to be as susceptible to being eaten by the birds that are diurnal as well. More offspring are produced than survive. In this scenario, it said that for every 500 babies, only 100 of them ever become old enough to reproduce. And then those that survive have favorable traits. I think common sense is going to tell you that the ones then that are surviving are those that are nocturnal, and so those are the ones that are going to be able to reproduce. And so how will the population change over time? Well, the nocturnal ones, there's going to be more of those than there are of the diurnal worms. So this is a good place where I would like for you to feel free to pause the video if you need to, and go ahead and change any answers that you've done on this worksheet, because the main thing is we want you to get them right. Okay, I'm assuming that you've paused it and we'll get started back. In the second problem, and you'll find out this is very repetitive, there are three types of polar bears. One's with thick coats, one with thin coats, one with medium coats. These are differences. These are ways that the polar bears vary, so these are going to be the variations. Some with thick coats, some with thin coats, some with medium coats. In this scenario, it is fall and it's soon to be winter. The temperatures are dropping rapidly, and the bears must keep warm, or they will freeze to death. Many of the bears have had two cubs each, but due to the extreme temperatures, many mothers only have one cub left. This is sad, but true. In this situation, which bear will natural selection act against? It's going to be acting against those with thin coats. They're going to be subject to being very, very cold. And they're not going to like that very much. And it's going to work well for those with the thick coats. And it's also working for those with medium coats. There's probably a lot of different variations in how medium is medium, how many differences are there. But the best answer is going to be natural selection is working for those with thick coats. Once again, I want you to pause just for a second and make sure that you have these next 5 points done. So I'm going to pause just for a second. Okay, continuing where we left off, we were at Darwin's 5 points talking about the polar bears. The population has variations. We understand those are the ones with thick coats, those with thin coats, and those with medium coats. Some variations are favorable. Obviously, those with the thicker coats, it's going to work in their favor much better in this particular environment. More offspring are produced than survive in this scenario. Two cubs are how many, that's how many most of the bears have, but only one will survive. And those that survive having the favorable traits, those are going to be those with the thick coats. Once again, this is very repetitive, but it should help solidify this in your minds. A population will change over time. Common sense will tell us survival of the fittest, natural selection. Most polar bears are going to have thick fur over time. Over time, that is going to increase. All right, we're going to scroll through problem number 3. We're going to be talking about ostriches. Ostriches. There are two types. There's those that run fast and those that run slow. Well, the fast bird can reach up to 40 miles per hour, but the jackals love to eat the ostriches, and they can reach up to 35 to 40 miles per hour as well. Survival of the fittest, natural selection. Which variation is going to be the best one? I think you already know. A flock of ostrich will lay 10 eggs. Each mother only lays one, but many rodents break into the eggs and eat the fetus before they hatch. So which ostrich will natural selection select against? It's going to select against those that run slowly. Those that run slowly. And it's going to work for those that are fast. Darwin's 5 points. The population has variations. Those were some run fast, some don't run quite as fast. Some variations are favorable. The ostriches that are fast, that's going to be a favorable trait. This one, it's a little more vague. Your answer on this is going to be a little more vague. More offspring are produced than survive. We understand that there's going to be a lot less will survive out of this because the rodents are going in and eating those eggs and the fetus before they hatch. So this one doesn't necessarily have a particular number. Some of you might have put 10 and 1, but the best way to put an answer on this would say that they lay around 10, but definitely less than 10 are surviving. But we know that those that survive are probably going to be those that run fast. And so that population is going to change over time. You're going to end up with a lot faster ostriches, and they may get faster and faster and faster as time goes on. And then number 4, we're going to talk about rabbits. We could talk about rabbits on those being fast and slow as well. That would apply the same way. So that is definitely a variation. I know around my house we have squirrels, and the squirrels around here are very, very fast. We don't have many slow squirrels because my dogs would always chase them around. And I think that more than likely, the only ones that survived were the ones that were fast enough to get away from the dogs that we had at one point. Um, but in this case, we're talking about a different variation or a different trait of the rabbits. In this one, it's about their diet. It's what they eat. There are some rabbits that strictly eat grass and some that eat berries and flowers. Okay, that's all fine and good, but then one year there was a drought. And you know that a drought, it means there's a lack of precipitation. And the plants were having difficulty staying alive. They certainly didn't have enough water or anything to produce any extras like berries or flowers or whatever. All they could do was to try and keep themselves green. So it was just the grass that was there. The rabbits have had babies all year long, but many are eaten by the foxes or the hawks. And due to the drought, many have starved to death. In this situation, the rabbit um, that has natural selection working against them will be the ones that eat the berries and the flowers. Because there's a drought, there's not as many berries and flowers out there for them to eat, and they're going to have a hard time surviving. So in this situation, natural selection is working against them, and it's working for those that eat the grass. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So we'll talk about Darwin's 5 points. The population has variations. In this situation, we're talking about the difference being those that strictly eat grass and those that strictly eat berries and flowers. Some variations are favorable. In this scenario, for this year, it's those that eat the grass. More offspring are produced than survive. This one doesn't really have set numbers. We just know that there are a lot of them that that are produced, but very few of them survive. This one, uh, your answers are really going to vary on that one, so don't worry about that. We're not going to mark that one wrong, as long as you understand that a lot of them never um, reach the point of actually reproducing. Those that survive are going to have the trait of eating grass more than likely, at least this year. A lot of the ones that will survive are going to have that favorable trait. And then this population over time, there's probably going to be more of the rabbits that strictly eat the grass. Then we'll go to number 5. This one is interesting. We really like it. We're going to talk about, why do the giraffes have the long necks? I know we got to talk about this a little bit before we got out of school. And um, there was a theory once upon a time that the giraffe's neck was long because it kept having to stretch for food, and it kept stretching. And Bob, in this scenario, believed that the giraffes have long necks because they have stretched their necks to try to reach the food that's high in the trees. And then that stretched neck characteristic was passed on to the offspring. Ryan, on the other hand, he believed that the giraffes with long necks were able to survive because they could reach the food, but those with short necks could not. And unfortunately, they died. So which ones were able to have babies? The long-necked giraffes reproduced. This is an example of the two different theories uh, of evolution. We know that Lamarck came before Darwin, so when Darwin was young, he actually studied Lamarck's theory, and he said, I don't know that I buy that. And so he thought that there was a better explanation for how things change over time. So actually, Lamarck is the one who believed that he he agreed with Bob, or Bob agreed with Lamarck, that the long necks occurred over time because they were passing on an acquired trait, or a trait acquired during their lifetime, onto their offspring. And Darwin believed different. He believed that there was a different variety of giraffe that happened to have a long neck that was able to survive in its environment. Survival of the fittest. And so Darwin and Ryan go together, and Lamarck and Bob. All right, and then this last page, it's a big sheet, and unfortunately we are unable to turn it, to rotate this one clockwise, 90 degrees. Uh, so I would like you to just follow along with the cursor, and we'll try to um, fill in these blanks as best we can. There are enough, each word that's in our word bank, let's go over those briefly. They are, if I can get the mouse in the right spot, here we go. Here's the word bank. All right, there is anatomical evidence, change over time, DNA, Darwin, dog breeds, finches, homologous structures, Galapagos, natural selection, survival of the fittest, new species, naturalist, turtles, vestigial structures, whale bones, and shaped shells. In this scenario, there is one word for each box. So if you get them a little mixed up, they're not going to fit just right. So there is only one right answer for each box. So let's start right up here at the top where it says evolution. Once I get this set just right. You have to bear with me just a little bit. Okay. And I will move my picture so we can see the blanks we're going to work with. We're going to start by filling in these blocks on the left side of the worksheet. And we're going to start right here with evolution and find one of the arrows coming off of it. What does evolution mean? I know that there's a lot of confusion sometimes, and we read more into the term evolution, but as far as I'm concerned, it's just talking about biological changes over time. It's how things change over time. And so that goes in this first block. Evolution means change over time. This can result in, and then we'll go back to our word bank. This, I have it over here. Our best word is going to be a new species. There may be a new species that develops from this change over time. Evolution was established by Charles Darwin, and he was known, and that goes in this block. This is Charles Darwin. He is most associated with the term evolution, and he was a naturalist. He was a person who loved nature. He studied nature all the time, and so he was called a naturalist. And he traveled to the Galapagos Islands, and he was very young when he went, and he stayed on this ship. He took a trip that was going to last, I think, like 5 years or something, and he ended up stopping at the Galapagos Islands, and he just loved everything there. And he was sitting around, and he started observing and writing in his journals, which I hope a lot of you guys are writing in your journals now. But he was writing in a journal of the things that he saw, and then he noticed that there were a couple of different types of animals. One of them was the finch with different beaks. So finch goes in this blank right here on the bottom right. And he also I noticed the turtles. I think the Galapagos Islands is very well known for the different turtles there. And they had different shaped shells. So right there we filled in a lot of the words from our word bank. But we just know that Charles Darwin established the term of evolution, which means change over time, which can result in a new species. And he was a naturalist who traveled to the Galapagos Islands. It's kind of a fun word to say, the Galapagos Islands, and observed finches and turtles with different shaped shells. And the finches had different beaks, depending on what food source was on the island. All right, we'll scroll up just a little bit. Sorry if I have to tilt my head, you'd probably have to as well. Let's go up here to the top of the page. Okay. Evolution means, okay, we did that one. Evolution occurs through the process of natural selection. That's what we've talked about during this entire thing. The process of natural selection. And I want you to know that the term that is synonymous with this is survival of the fittest. This is something that I can buy into. I think, if something is well suited to its environment, it's probably going to survive. And if it's not suited to that environment, it's not going to. So survival of the fittest, that is natural selection. This can also occur through artificial selection. The best way that I could, the word that's going to go in here is dog breeds. And you think about how these are artificially put together to create a particular dog with a particular skill set. Some of the dogs were bred to be small where they could burrow up into holes to get animals out of them. Some of them had to be much larger depending on if they were herding large animals. So different dog breeds, it's fun to kind of Google them and go through and research, why is this particular breed, um, why has it been bred to have particular characteristics? And when you go back through there, you can find the origins of your dog and why it was artificially bred to perform a particular task. Okay, scrolling here to the middle, I'll try to set this up. I'm going to kind of be in the way on this one. I apologize for that, but we'll kind of work through it. Evolution is supported through three different categories. You have molecular evidence. This is DNA. If you think about the molecules and the DNA, I think you learned about that in 7th grade. So there's going to be some evidence there. There's also going to be some fossil evidence, such as whale bones. And in this scenario, I'm sorry, my video is in the way, but that block, you're going to put whale bones in there. People could study those, and that goes into our fossil record. That's just a compilation of all of the fossils that we have found, and they categorize them in the fossil record. And is also supported by anatomical structures. These are things about our anatomy, and if you think about anatomy, then that's going to means parts of the body. So we're going to look at those last couple, such as vestigial structures. This is like the legs on a skink, and I think that is probably going to be some kind of a little lizard or something. I don't really know what a skink is, to be honest with you. That's something you can Google, and I'll probably Google it here in just a little bit. But that is vestigial structures. And then the homologous structures or the homologous structures, depending on how you want to pronounce that, um, like the forelimbs of bats and whales, they actually have some little bones in there that look like they could have probably developed at some point into some type of an arm or something, but they don't use it. It's something that's in them that they don't use. And so that is homo, meaning the same, meaning that a lot of creatures have these particular structures, but they don't necessarily use them. I know that we have I think the appendix, in humans, we don't really necessarily know what that particular purpose is, but I'm sure there is one, but that is just a structure. Anyway, I hope that that you did well on this. If you didn't, it's not the end of the world. Just use this as a chance to correct the ones you've missed, replay the video if you need to, and go over those. Also, then if you have any questions, we're going to be having a Zoom meeting on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and I hope that you're able to log into it. I think a lot of you have already been doing them for math and for language arts, but we're going to be doing science and social studies. And so on Wednesday, I hope you can tune in and participate in the meeting. And if you have any questions, we'd love that opportunity to discuss them with you. And be looking for video number 2 about the second worksheet. And I want y'all to stay safe and know that we miss you. I miss you. I certainly like interacting with you a whole lot better. It's a lot more exciting than sitting here staring at a screen. And But anyway, I want y'all to stay safe and know that we care about you and we're thinking about you. And if there's anything that we can do for you, definitely get in touch with us. And that's it. Thank you. Bye bye.